We're going to be talking about relationships. And as a human being, you'll appreciate that relationships are a fundamental part of our lives. In fact, we're constantly interacting with other people, with one another. In fact, as I mentioned in the first lesson, it's one of the elements in self-development. Remember, this is a course that deals with fundamental principles in self-development. And we talked about this aspect of autonomy. And we are also going to be dealing with this aspect called empathy, which is essentially the ability to be able to relate to those people in and around and about you and in everything that you do. It's easy to gain autonomy and live by yourself and not actually participate in the world, which is reserved for a few people, extremely introverted people. That's not what we're dealing with here. We're talking about generally being able to relate to those people that we meet. And as you'll appreciate, various different types of relationships we engage with on a daily basis. And these could be anything from relating to our family in a domestic situation, or it could be at work, where there is an official role that you have to fulfill. Other relationships include social, with friends and things like that. So we're relating all the time on different levels. So the principle remains the same. Doesn't matter who you're relating to, but more importantly, how are you able to relate to that person? Obviously, the relationships that you are engaging with on a daily basis, those you're going to have to pay a little bit more closer attention to, put a little bit more effort in, and to be able to relate to those people that you are relating to on a daily basis. Now, one of the most important aspects of this talk is that obviously we understand the need to be able to relate properly to people. This need drives the desire for proper relationships. If we cannot relate properly, then our relationships suffer. And this often leads to a large amount of frustration. It can lead to separation. It can lead to stress, bitterness between people. We're seeing a massive rise in divorces all over the world. It's, in fact, even in India, which is said to be very sort of immune to divorce, you're seeing it happening there now too, even. So one of the biggest blunders that people make in being able to relate is that they make this assumption, or they presume that it is the person, the environment, the situation that makes the difference. No, this relationship is sour because this person just is not doing the things that I thought he would do or she would do, or this person has started behaving differently, or whatever the case. Or this environment is not to my liking. I preferred it when it was more like this. So we make this blunder all the time, and we tend to blame the external circumstances for our own inability to relate. It's a farce. In fact, it's a fallacy. And we find this, especially in relationships these days. People take enormous amounts of time, enormous amount of effort to find the right person. In fact, I mean, I know people that are well into their middle age, and they have a desire for partnership. And when you ask them, you know, sort of getting older now, and you know, I understand that you want a partner and you want to get married and all of that. What's the problem? Invariably, they'll tell you, "Now, you know what, Craig, I just haven't met the right person. Mr. Right, he's out there. I know. I just got to find him." And this is the blunder that everyone makes, because they believe it's in the person. It's not. And I'm going to prove that to you this evening. So when we talk about relationships, what we must appreciate is that, and this is one of the most fundamental aspects that you'll have to relate. And this is a quote from the book by Swami Parthasarathy in his book, Governing Business and Relationships. He says, "It is not whom or what you meet in life that matters, but how you meet it." Essentially, supporting what I've been saying. It's not whom or what you meet in life. You could have the best partner and make a complete mess out of the relationship. You could have the worst partner and have a completely healthy relationship. So again, it's not in the objects and being. We'd given this example before. A person picks up a cigarette. He loves smoking, gets such great pleasure out of it. Another person detests it. One person is waiting to divorce his wife. Another person is eagerly waiting to marry the same lady. What this implies is that the happiness you seek is not inherent in the objects and beings of the world. And so he says in the book, Governing Business and Relationships, I don't know if any of you have that book, brilliant book. He says it's not whom or what you meet in life that matters, but how you meet it. And the first thing that we have to appreciate in being able to relate to one another is that no two minds are alike. No two minds are the same. Impossible. Even siblings. And you could go one step further. You could say identical twins, different minds, even partners. Okay, we're not talking about similarities. Of course, in the good old days in India, the partners were chosen for each other based initially on certain fundamental similarities, similar upbringing, similar education, similar family values. So there's obviously some starting point required, but what we have to appreciate after that is no two minds are the same. So again, a relationship by itself cannot bring harmony. It's not, again, in that person, but in how you relate. That's where the harmony comes from, in your ability to effectively relate to another person. So this is, again, I can give you example after example. I'll ask you a question. Is a knife good or bad? Well, some of you, half of you may say, well, it's bad. A knife's bad. It's dangerous. There's so many stabbings and knife fights and things that arise from knives, terrible things. Another person will say, well, I don't think I could feed myself if it wasn't for the knife. So the knife being the same can do useful things, it can do detrimental things. So again, it's not in the objects, it's not in the beings, but your relationship with it, how you're able to relate. And that's what makes the essential difference. So again, what we're talking about in the course is this aspect, and this is the essence of Vedanta philosophy, is the ability within the practitioner, the ability within the individual to employ these methods of self-development, these practices, which essentially culminate in self-sufficiency. So the more you engage in the practices laid out by Vedanta, and we're going to do a whole lecture, a whole topic next week, which deals with these integrated self-development practices. But the culmination of that is the development of self-sufficiency. And what I mean by self-sufficiency, and this is, again, coming from that first lecture, self-sufficiency isn't, oh no, I grow my own vegetables and I'm actually free of Eskom. I just went solar. We're not talking about that when we talk about self-sufficiency. What we are talking about is that your own sense of well-being, in other words, your own sense of happiness, is intrinsically generated. In other words, it is not dependent on external factors, again, over which you have no control. So the present situation that we're seeing in the world generally, but more specifically in the context of relationships, is that your sense of well-being, your sense of happiness is relatively stable, is relatively sound if certain external factors or conditions are met. In other words, if my partner is behaving in a way that I think is appropriate or to my liking, it's good, everything's fine. As soon as that changes, what happens? Your sense of happiness changes, your well-being essentially changes. So when that sense of, or when that external condition is removed, what happens? Well-being is affected. Your well-being plummets. So what we have to understand here is, and this segues into what we're talking about, and it relates to this idea of dependency, which we're going to be driving home throughout the talk tonight. And the problem arises, right, is, excuse me. Now, you appreciate that this current situation we find ourselves is that if these external circumstances change, our well-being changes, our sense of happiness changes. So what we're inadvertently doing is we are ascribing our source of happiness to someone else. See, I'm happy. That person makes me happy. Why are you in a relationship? Because that person makes me happy. See, you may know, love it. What's the problem with that? Why would it make if sorry, Renuka, your sound is on. Please keep your sound off if possible. So why is, unless, of course, Renuka, you have something to say, then raise your hand. Otherwise, it creates disturbances. So coming back to what I was saying. So this proves problematic because we then ascribe, or we attribute our happiness to someone else. What's happened? What's happened there? Well, we've become dependent on something external to us for our sense of well-being. This we call as dependency. You see it often, well, I see it often in parents with their children. How are things? Fantastic. Fantastic. Couldn't be better. Wow, what's going on? Children doing so well. So they're doing so well at school. So happy, you know, no issues. Life's good. 2 weeks later, what's going on? Oh, no, it's a nightmare. Complete nightmare. What's wrong? What's wrong? Kids are playing up again, you know, I don't know what to do. They're getting calls from the school, you know, I don't know what's going on. You're completely dependent on your children. Your children determine your happiness. You may say, well, that's understandable. Well, it's not. We're aiming to achieve a degree of happiness independent of all of that. Whether the children are doing well at school or not, you should maintain a sense of personal well-being. So again, when we're talking about this aspect of dependency, you develop this clinginess, and that we call as attachment. Don't worry if you don't get the concept now. We're going to go a lot more deeper into it, and this idea of attachment and what it means and why it is destroying. It is the root that is destroying relationships individually, at the community level, even religious levels, even global levels. There's this virus of attachment. I mean, I could talk about attachment all night long, because attachment is what is creating and generating the majority of the problems that we are faced with these days. So what happens when we develop this attachment? We develop with it an expectation. So you expect the person to behave in a particular way that caters to you, that makes you happy. Now, of course, this is impossible. It's almost a ludicrous request, yet we are doing it all the time, unbeknowingly. And it's no fault of anyone's. Without the correct education, this is a natural offset or a natural effect of what happens when you function off the mind. So we find relationships being destroyed, relationships decaying all over the world. So what we want to try and establish here, and here's just a quote from The Hermit by Oliver Goldsmith. He says, "And love is still an emptier sound, the modern fair one's jest, on earth unseen or only found to warm the turtle's nest." And the reason I'm bringing this quote in here is because, of course, I'm sure many of you are thinking, all right, so where is love in this equation? Because obviously, to establish a harmonious relationship, to build authentic relationships with people, there has to be this feeling of love towards another person. And that could be between two partners, two spouses, could be between a parent and a child. Even in the workplace, we're not talking about this sort of superficial sense of love and I love you and you love me and let's love each other. No, I'm talking about a sense of true love, which means identifying with another person. So he says here, Oliver Goldsmith, he says, there's no love here. There's no love in the world. Empty as sand. On earth, unseen, he says. Now, Oliver Goldsmith is an intelligent fellow. He says, love is unseen. Or it's only there to warm the turtle's nest. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. So what is this essential difference? What are we talking about when we talk about love and attachment? And the first thing you have to understand is what the entire world calls is love is in fact attachment. How do you know that? Well, as has been reiterated in the previous slides, as soon as that person stops catering to you or does something you feel is not to your liking or not correct in your eyes, the love is lost. That feeling that you once possessed, all of a sudden, is gone. It's no longer there. Love is unaltering. It doesn't alter when altercation finds, says Shakespeare. Now, the reason this is so confusing, the reason why we think or what we believe love to be is actually attachment is because they look very similar. In fact, it stems from the same emotion or feeling, which is an adoration for another person. There's this affection for another person. And you may say, well, isn't that love? Well, it is and it isn't, depending on one factor. And that factor is related to dependency, but more importantly, is a degree of selfishness. And this is what ruins the love. I'm going to show an equation here. This should make it a lot simpler and easier for you to understand. So when we have this beautiful emotion of love and it's vitiated by selfishness, in other words, you want to cash in the relationship. There's something that you want to gain. In other words, you put your self-centered interests above the other person's. This is selfishness, essentially. Your needs, wants, demands should be catered to before the other person's. This is what we mean generally by selfishness. You are primarily interested in your own sense of happiness above others. And you may argue, well, what's wrong with that? Well, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be happy, but are you doing it for your own selfish reasons to the detriment of others? Or can you incorporate your own sense of happiness and use it along or attempt to gain it along with making others happy? If you're able to cater to others, if you're able to have others' interests at heart, this is called unselfishness. I'm just defining these terms so we're on the same page here. So when there's this element of selfishness that pervades a relationship, that we call as attachment. Even one speck of selfishness and that beautiful expression of love is polluted. In fact, attachment is nothing but a pollution of love. Now, what is love? Well, if we take that attachment, that pollution, and we remove the selfishness out of the equation, what's left is love. How do we do that? It's simple. I can tell you right now how to do it. Putting into practice takes time. It's not easy because of the strength of our ego and egocentric demands. So becoming more unselfish simply just means reducing the ego, reducing the sense, this importance you place on me, my, I. If you're able to do that, you are one step closer to experiencing love in its purest form. So when your love is preferential, you consider yourself distinct and separate from the rest. See, to the extent you love one person, to that extent you don't love the others. You may say, well, I claim to love everybody. That's a big claim. But to the extent that your love is preferential, to that extent, it's attachment. It's in fact one of the descriptions of attachment is this preferential love. Swamiji gives this funny example often, and it's of a man who comes to pick up his kids from school. And the kids are all playing there, and he walks over to the kids, and he picks up his child, right, and starts kissing. Oh, I'm so happy to see you. Which happens to be one of the least attractive childs there. No, I'm not saying go to school and start kissing all of the children. Oh, I love you, love you, love you. No, we're not saying that. But what we are saying is, why have this preferential feeling towards one? Well, should I say, when you have a preferential feeling towards one, it means that your feeling towards the others is less. It's just a simple equation. So when this happens, that emotion is turned from love into attachment. Essentially, attachment is nothing but self-centered love. Because why are you picking up that child? Well, it caters to me. It's my child. Again, you can see how the ego is sliding in. It is making its presence felt in that beautiful expression of love. No, you don't have to look after every children. You don't have to look after all the kids in the neighborhood. But your feeling to all of them could be the same. That's not what we're seeing happening in the world. Distinct clingingness, distinct attachment, preferential love, as it were, given to one above others. And all this is doing is creating indifference amongst people. Now, when we talk about attachment, this is essentially, as I said before, is what is destroying relationships around the world. For the reasons given, you'll see them, I've tabulated them just to make it sort of clear for you. And this attachment arises when we are functioning from the mind. Again, if you'll remember, going back, the mind is the seat of our desires. And when I say desires, included within that framework is our egocentric demands, wants, needs. That's all incorporated with when I say desires. So this attachment essentially stems from the mind. Get the mind under control, you can start controlling the attachments, not before then. And this is again why we placed in the previous lectures, and again in this lecture, why we place so much importance on controlling the mind, controlling those desires. Because it's through the control of our desires, through the control of our mind, that we elevate the personality. This is called self-development, is nothing but developing an intellect to control the vagaries of the mind. See, in attachment, what happens is the mind is like super glue. Whatever it alights on, it'll get attached to. You see something nice, oh, I want that. You remember a certain joy or an experience, and you want to repeat that. This is again the mind, all centered within the mind. So essentially, you're binding yourself in the situation. You become attached to someone, and as we covered, this dependency, it's like a mental bondage, as it were. You are attaching yourself to all these objects and beings, in the case of being able to relate correctly, and you become a slave. You become a slave to the ups and downs of the other person, Person's in a good mood, you're in a good mood. Person's in a bad mood, you're in a terrible mood too. So whatever happens to that object or being or person happens to you. So this attachment essentially restricts our freedom. We don't have freedom. We're bound. Now, I'm not saying it has to be, it's not that as soon as you beget children, you're bound. No, very rarely, but I have met people that have children and are free. It's mental. We're talking at the mental level here. We're not talking about, of course, at the physical level, you have to take them to school, you have to spend some time with them and all of that. That's something different. We're talking about it from a mental perspective. So attachment, possessiveness, two sides of a coin. And I'm not going to go through them. You can see them up there. But it's just essentially a comparison between what we mean as attachment and what we mean as love. And there you'll see the comparison. So again, when we talk about love, it's a divine quality. It's a higher sense of expression, or a feeling, we could say, of empathy. That ability to identify and be in harmony with one and all. See, it's often said, I don't know if you guys have heard this saying, it says, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So what is the extent of your love? Not how many people you love, the one person you hate. That is the strength of your love. So we'll see again, this sense of love is universal. As soon as it becomes preferential, even if there's 1% preferential preference in that love, it becomes attachment. Not a terrible form of attachment, because it's so slight, but it's attachment. It's polluted still. Even 1% polluted is not pure. If I say to you, here is a sample of gold, you'll say, is it pure gold? Yes, it's pure. Pure gold, is quite soft. As soon as they put other alloys in, it becomes hard. And then it's not pure anymore. Even if they put a little bit in, it's not pure gold. And it's not pure love if there's any aspect of preferential treatment involved. So we say this idea of love is universal. It is applicable to one and all. In fact, when I say that, it means you're in harmony with one and all. You essentially have others' interests at heart. In other words, their happiness means as much to you as your own. There's no difference. It's not that you treat yourself any less and you treat others better. It's not that. It's having a genuine sense of affection, a genuine sense of identification, and a genuine interest in others' well-being. And how does this arise? Well, it arises when you have a right understanding of relationship and how to relate. And this is what we're going to get into. So how is it that we're able to establish authentic relationships in our lives? So we're going to look at a couple aspects. And some factors. And of course, again, it's not an exhaustive list. There may be others, but we are just focusing on a few examples here in order that we can make the shift from attachment to love. See, again, I'm reiterating, it's important that you understand that what the entire world nowadays causes love is attachment. If that's the only thing you understand from this lecture, you are already 20 steps ahead in converting that attachment, that preferential attachment, into an elevated feeling of love. But you have to understand that. No. I don't think that applies to me. No, I love my spouse and I love my children and we've got a perfect relationship. So be it. There's always room for improvement. And I don't think any of you would have signed up here if you didn't think there was room for improvement. So how do we make that even better? So we want to start shifting. Basically, we want to start shifting the left-hand column to the right-hand column. So from preferential to universal, from centered on your own interests to accommodating the interests of others, from a selfish, self-centered mindset to one of selflessness or sacrificial. So how do we do that? Again, we're going to focus on these aspects: service and sacrifice, how to serve and sacrifice, duties versus rights, giving, not taking, the ability to make correct assessments, and refraining from confrontation. So when we talk, before I go on, I just wanted to show you this quote by Mary Baker Eddy. She says, home is the dearest spot on earth, and it should be the center, but not the boundary of the affection. Just let you ponder on that for a bit. Home is the dearest spot on earth, and it should be the center, but not the boundary of affection. So you often find that this is exactly what happens. You have this feeling of love, as long as it's contained to the family unit. It's ticking all the boxes. As soon as you have to expand and start looking further afield into the greater family, uncles and cousins, and all of a sudden, no, I don't really have that same feeling for that one uncle. I mean, he's a strange fellow, and what kind of a life he's led. Now, I'd prefer to not to have anything to do with him, in fact. Where is the love? So again, it starts at the home, because and this is often why parents beget children, to try in an attempt to experience that feeling. Now, that's all good and well, but you need to start expanding that idea. And when we speak about serving and sacrificing in the context of, it's in the context of unselfishness. And when we talk about unselfishness, this marks the character of a person. This marks your own degree of self-development and ushers you towards a state of well-being in life. So everything, or this particular idea, remember, we're studying this in the context of developing our own well-being, our sense of fulfillment, satisfaction, and happiness in the world. How do we achieve that? Well, one of the ways he talks about it, or one of the ways Vedanta approaches this, is from the standpoint of selfishness versus unselfishness. Now, you find as you mature, as you develop the personality, you slowly start becoming unselfishness. It's, in fact, one of the yardsticks of maturity, spiritual development, self-development practices, all culminate in this expression of unselfishness. When we look at the lowest cadre of people, the worst type of people are those that are selfish. You can see it. It's evident in society, even within groups of friends. A guy comes along and you're all having a jolly good time. One person in one of the friends, selfish guy. People, oh, it's him again. Oh, another guy walks in. Hey, this guy's arrived. Wow, hey, welcome, welcome, come. What can we get you? What's the difference? It's purely their level of selfishness. You may not see it, but this is exactly what's happening. Now, what's happened in society now, and this is a book that Swamiji has written called Fall of the Human Intellect, is that selfishness, self-centeredness pervades the world to an extent that is more prevalent now than has been in past centuries or decades, for sure. And this has led to a society that has become corrupt. Everywhere we look, there is corruption, there is disparity, there is war, there is all these terrible atrocities that are being committed, comes back to one thing. What can I get? What can I get? What can I get out of this situation? When A meets B, what is A thinking of in today's society? What can I get out of this fella? Oh, you said you got a this, that. Can I get some? Or can I get a discount? Or can you organize something for me? This is what the temperament of the world has become. People are only interested in what they can get. See, all that needs to happen to change the entire planet is shifting from what can I get out of B to what can I do for B? How can I serve B? This is no different in a relationship. You need to employ this method. You need to develop this ability to serve. How can you enter a relationship with a partner? How can I best serve their interests? What can I do? I may need to sacrifice something. How can I sacrifice to ensure that their interests are met, their interests are catered to? You start functioning in that way. Not only will you sleep easier at night, but you find that the relationship automatically improves, drastically, in fact. So if you want to create a harmonious relationship or an authentic relationship, you will have to adopt this attitude. There's no other way. If you say, I'm not really too interested in serving others, or I'd rather look after myself, there's no way that you can cultivate any meaningful and harmonious relationship. It must stem from this ability to serve. What can I do for others? Again, how do you achieve this? By reduction of your own ego, by reduction of your own self-centered demands. You start catering to greater and greater circles. What I mean by that is it will be easier to, in a diagrammatic form. So we see here at the bottom, small circle, yourself. You're only interested in what you can get. This is majority of the world today. A lot of people, a few people can extend that to their immediate family. Yeah. For instance, why do you go to work? Well, I just want to get my paycheck so I can get nice things and live in a nice place and drive a nice car. I know people like this. I met people like this. They still functioning like this. Self-absorbed, not at all interested in anybody else's happiness. This is the lowest cadre of people. As you start identifying with your family, those closest to you, nearest and dearest, we call them, you're increasing that circle. You are expanding a little bit into love, but that's still limited. It's still constricted. Increase that circle and you'll appreciate it. As you increase that circle, as you increase that ability to identify with a greater circle, so you reduce the ego, so you reduce your selfishness, so you can improve your relationships. If you are able to accommodate and have a feeling of oneness for your entire community, even if we can aspire for that level, the whole world is a different place. Okay, the law of nature is such that those governed by the spirit of obligatory duties shall flourish, while those governed by rights shall perish. Again, this is a quote from the book Governing Business and Relationships by Swami Parthasarathy. So this is the second aspect we're going to talk about, is duties versus rights. Now, today's trend, we'll appreciate, is based on rights, insisting rights over fulfillment of obligations. You see, especially in America, because they set the trend, in America these days, before you get married, there's documents and documents of what? Prenuptials. No. as my wife, you are allowed this, this, and this. As my husband, you can have that, that, and that. Not this side of the cupboard, not that. You can use this car only on this day. Some madness going on. Why? Because the whole thing is based on one's rights. What is my right as your husband? Or what is my right as your wife? Starting things on completely the wrong foot. So these unethical legal claims are a manifestation of this exact idea, where the relationship starts on claiming of rights. Now, how do we adjust this? How do we ensure that we can create harmonious relationships? Because this is the starting point. The entire world is functioning this way. What is my right? We have to change rights into duties. What is my duty as a parent to a child? What is my right? This whole debacle, Mother's Day, Father's Day. No, Father's Day, I'm allowed to do anything I want. Mother's Day, I can do anything I want, and you should buy me presents and make me. It's the most ridiculous thing. In fact, the only reason these days are so popular because other 364 days of the year, nobody cares or even thinks about the dad or the mom. So they got to put a special day there for it. It's the most ridiculous thing. Anyway, so if everyone functioned off obligations, there'd be no need for this Mother's Day, Father's Day, because every day is Mother's Day, Father's Day. Your obligation is to serve the parent, to serve your parents. Likewise, the parent's obligation is to serve the child, to nourish, develop, encourage, support. See, in any relationship, as soon as you shift this from what can I get out of it, or what is my right as a father, what is my right as a partner, to what is my duty, you soon realize your only duty, your only obligation in any relationship is to serve. How best can I serve? So they're very interrelated. We can't segregate any of these, what were they, 5 points, 5 factors. They're all very much interrelated. If you can draw the connections, great. If not yet, that's fine. Just focus on each aspect and trying to adopt and improve that particular aspect within your own life. So again, when you perform your obligatory duties, there's no expectation. You understand your obligations. You understand what duties are required of you that you've set for yourself, and you don't expect anything else. In fact, there is a certain amount of joy that comes from merely just performing your obligations. There's no expectation. It's my duty as a mother to cook, to nourish my family. You don't sit there patiently waiting after the meal for them to thank you. Oh, I wonder where they're going to thank me. I wonder when they're going to say, what a nice meal. No, you don't need it. Your joy comes in serving. Your joy comes in fulfilling that obligation. There's a great amount of joy. What is thanks for the nice meal? People are hanging on that. It's you can appreciate the state to which relationships have declined. So again, and this applies, this statement applies not only to persons and relationships, but again to societies even at large. So societies based on obligations flourish, while societies based on rights perish. You can take it to that extent. So in order to shift the focus of attention away from your egocentric demands, put it on the obligation. Put it on that ideal to serve the family, to serve the community, to serve the country. Let that be your obligation in life. You're not doing it for anything. You don't want to get name, recognition, money, anything from it. Simply just doing it because it's your duty. If you can function in this way, there's such a great amount of happiness that you derive from merely performing your obligations. That's one way of guaranteeing you fall asleep every night within 30 seconds. At the end of every day, imagine you can come to the end of every day and you go, I managed to get through today, fulfilling all my obligations and duties. Nowhere did I falter. What can prevent sleep? Slip into beautiful sleep. Okay. The next aspect we're going to talk about is giving and not taking. This is the third aspect within improving our relationships. So for a relationship to succeed, we must change from this attitude of taking. What can I get? What can I get? What can I get? To this attitude of giving. It's spirit of sharing. What can I give? See, the Swami has been going around the world for 60, 70 years. He, as he goes along, he's trying to educate all of us all the time. And one of the things he does on his travels is he never accepts any discounts. In fact, he always will pay full price, sometimes even more. You may say, well, lucky he can afford to do that. It's not whether you can afford or not. It's having that attitude in life. Prabhu, after you. You're in the traffic and someone wants to come in. Taxi driver. Oh, no. I don't want to let him in. These taxi drivers are full of nonsense. And you edge forward, and he edges forward, and he edges forward. What are you going to gain out of that? You're cutting 10 minutes off your sleeping time. It's 10 minutes you got to sit awake at night further. Ponder on your day. See, what have you got to gain by taking? Nothing. But this is not the belief. In fact, I was having a conversation with just a worker, you know, and this concept came up, and you know, I said, yeah, it's in life, you know, the more you give, the more you get back. He had other ideas, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know. It's a beautiful phrase in the scriptures called Balaha. Balaha means children. They're ignorant, innocent in a way. Anyway, this is what he said made so much sense, because this is what the world believes. No, I've got to take. If I don't take, I'm not going to get anywhere. If I don't go out and get that for myself, she's going to go out and get that for me. No one else. I must get it. I must go and take it. This is why the world's in such a state. Imagine everyone's attitude was, well, what can I give? As opposed to what can I get? If you start developing this attitude of giving as opposed to taking, automatically you'll find such an improvement in the relationship. But again, that ego comes in, constantly interfering. No, you should get this. How can I get more? Me, man, again, destroys the quality of the relationship to no end. The best example of this is little children. You see children, young, 2, 3-year-olds, whatever, 4 maybe, in a playground. And if you've ever observed it, even at a party, you'll find as soon as a child has a sweet, you know, or if a toy even. I see this often with siblings, young kids. As soon as that child doesn't want to part with its beloved toy or a sweet or whatever, you see the look on their face changes. Starts frowning. It's mine. It's mine. Yeah, no, it's mine. The countenance on the face goes. It's amazing to watch, in fact. As opposed to an expression when they want to give. No, here, you have it. It's my last one, but you have it. There's a big smile on their face. Now, if we can't learn something from this incident, then how can we learn? Children are so innocent. They're the beautifully expressing nature. We don't condone the child who grabs the sweet for himself. Oh, it's mine. But no, we use that to learn, to see what's happening. Because this is exactly what's happening mentally. There's a frown imprinted on your mental equanimity. You're destroying your own peace, essentially. But you give, there's a beautiful expression that happiness pervades your entire character. The quote in Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I don't know if any of you have read the book. I'm sure most of you have seen the recent musical they turned it into. It says their life is to give, not to take. The priest, I don't know if you remember the priest, he presents the convict with the candlesticks after he already tried to steal the silver plates. Presents him with candlesticks and says life is to give, not to take. That one incident reformed that guy's entire life. He became a beacon of service. All he did was serve and serve and serve, and he saw how he rose up. He rose up in the community. He was adored by everyone. Simply adopting this attitude to give. You want to improve the quality of your relationship. Start functioning with this attitude. At least attempt to. At least try. What can I give? What can I put into this? As opposed to what can I get out of it? Assessment. Now, we did cover this a little bit in the context of stress. But again, what's happened here is, in terms of assessment, because there is this lack or loss of intellect, which has occurred because there's no attempt essentially to develop the intellect. There's no guidelines or practices or anything given. The entire schooling system is based on the acquisition of intelligence. And this we've described the difference between the two. So because of lack of intellect, what's happened is attachment and possessiveness have ruined our relationships. So we understand that in order to improve our relationships, we need to start fortifying the intellect. In order to reduce our stress, we need to start fortifying the intellect. In order to manage our lives, we need to manage ourselves. What is self-management? Development of the intellect. Remember, I did warn you in the beginning of the course. I said, if you are sick and tired of this word intellect, by the end of not third, maybe fourth, but surely fifth lesson, if you are sick and tired of the word intellect, and does this guy need to say anything more, I've done my job. I'm happy. So essentially, everything boils down to improving and fortifying this wondrous equipment that enables us to endure. It enables us to live stress-free. It enables us to have harmonious relationships. But of course, we appreciate this takes time. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of effort. So in the interim, again, how do we improve our relationships? What can we do now? And what we can do is to just engage in a simple practice of assessment. Assess the person with whom you're relating. What type of person are they? What do they like? What are their inclinations? What irritates them? What gets them upset? All of these things. And the closer and the more you relate to someone, the greater your assessment needs to be. The more time and energy and effort you need to put in to that assessment. Now, as soon as you are able to assess someone correctly, see, we are brilliant. We are very, very good at doing this with animals. We know exactly how to treat a tiger or a cobra as compared to a kitten or a lamb. You would not necessarily pick up a spider, but you may brush off a fly. Whatever the case, we know exactly how to deal with animals because we've assessed their nature. Tiger, vicious, ferocious. Snake, tricky. Stand back. We know how to deal with them. We don't know how to deal with humans. And the reason is that animals have a collective nature. All lambs are meek and mild, or tigers are ferocious. The problem with human beings is they all have an individual nature. So to the extent we're able to assess a person's nature, to that extent we know what to expect and how to relate to that person, just as we do with animals. So when we say assess, this is not some form of criticism or judgment. We're not judging the person. They may have positive and negative attributes, just as you have positive and negative attributes. What we want to do is we make an assessment of that so we know what to expect. So we don't create any false expectations. It's when we create the false expectations that stress arises, and out of stress comes bitterness, confrontations, and the rest. You may have a partner that's irritable. When they come home from work, give them some space. Don't compound the irritability. That relationship already gathers momentum. It gathers a more positive force if you're able to assess another person. Understand them for what they are, not what you would like them to be. Oh, no, I wish my son was more like this. Or I wish my daughter was more like this. Your daughter, your son is like that. Accept that. There is an acceptance that goes with assessment. You accept that the kitten is gentle. You can fond it. You accept that the tiger is ferocious. Don't go near it. The same principle you need to adopt in your relationship with people. It's when you're unable to assess that you make these unreasonable expectations, and that destroys the relationship. How can an irritable husband be unirritable? Impossible. How can a cobra not hiss and spit? It's impossible. That's their nature. Just as you have a particular nature, so does everyone. Now, of course, you want to assess your own nature and understand your own faults, but at the same time, you want to assess the nature of those around you so you know how to relate properly. Finally, this idea of confrontation. Of course, it seems quite obvious to create authentic relationships. We want to avoid confrontation. Now, confrontation always requires participation of two. It's like hands clapping. You need two palms to clap a hand, right? You can't clap a hand with one palm. Possible. Similarly, in any argument or confrontation between two people, it means two people. Now imagine one person is going on, screaming and shouting. How long can that last? Eventually they get tired, they get fed up. As soon as you retaliate, as soon as you come into the picture, there's a confrontation. So where does this confrontation come from? I, again, that ego comes in. I am right, you are wrong. No. I am right and you are wrong. Who is right, who is wrong? One person's right is another person's wrong. It's all relative. Another person, from their perspective, thinks that that is right. What makes their perspective right or wrong and yours right or wrong? So we believe that we are in the right. We are always right. That's the ego. This is how it expresses. I am superior. So in order to reduce conflict, we again need to tackle our ego. Just entertain that thought. Maybe they are right. No, definitely wrong, definitely wrong. Just accommodate that thought. Maybe they could be right. Most definitely from their perspective, they're right. So as soon as you start adjusting in this way, in fact, Swamiji even claims to have saved many marriages by giving them this simple advice. Just assume that for an instant, they may be right. You may be wrong. That thought is enough. That prevents a confrontation. And in fact, you want to prevent confrontation at any cost. One way is just not to get involved. Just don't participate. Don't be that other hand in the equation. The person will go on and go on. Eventually, they run out of steam. You've avoided a confrontation. But it's the ego that comes up. Confrontation. So just to summarize what we've talked about and just hopefully give you a breakdown, and then if there are any questions, we can take some up at the end. What we initially discussed was that it's not whom or what you meet in life that matters, but how you meet them, how you relate to them is important. The equation that we need to get right is this love attachment equation. Now, of course, love is equal to attachment minus selfishness. So as soon as we start removing selfishness out of our relationships, we are edging or nudging further towards love, true love, and away from attachment. The more selfishness that pervades the relationship, this catering to me and mine, this ego, the more we sink into attachment. And attachment is deadly. So we appreciate that the ego and its associated selfish self-centeredness ruins relationships. So how do we avert this? Well, we engage in unselfish activity. How do we do that? By performing our duties, our obligations, and not claiming rights. Giving. Develop this beautiful art of giving. Life is to give. A person who can adopt this mantra throughout life is a happy person. You'll never meet an unhappy person. Or should I say, you'll never meet a happy person that is selfish. Impossible. Similarly, they may put on a garb of happiness, but when they are alone by themselves, guaranteed they're unhappy. Similarly, you'll never meet a happy person that is not unselfish. In other words, to the extent that you are unselfish, to that extent you are happy. Give, give, give. Life is to give. After you, after you. Finally, or should I say, having the ability to correctly assess a person can clear up a lot of unnecessary expectations. Finally, one of the most effective ways to start building healthy, harmonious, authentic relationships is to avoid confrontation at any cost. Okay, that is a presentation for this evening. We, of course, as always, do have some time for questions and clarifications at the end, and anyone is welcome to put forward any questions that they may have. We can have a few minutes to think about it, unless you have some clarifications, and I'd be happy to address those.
Rishabh, yes.
Yes.
So you very correctly spoke about relationships, and it should not be based on external circumstances. Your happiness should not be hedged on somebody else. But how important is the relationship you have with yourself? Because if you can't love yourself, if you can't accept yourself, if you can't treat yourself with respect, you would not be able to extend that to another person.
No, of course, you do have a point there, and this relates back to, again, what we talked about in the first class, and this idea of self-development. And for us to live fruitful, productive, prosperous lives, we need to work on ourselves. We need to improve our inner personality. Until we do that, you have a point. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to relate to others in a way if we can't even deal with ourselves. So that's why we put that lecture in the beginning. First thing you need to do is start working on yourself. Of course, it's not something that happens in isolated incidences. Okay, for the next year, I'm just going to work on myself. I'm not going to pay too much attention to my work and getting stressed. I'll just work on myself. And then the next year, I'll deal with the stress aspect, the work aspect of my life. Hopefully by then I've grown to an extent I can relate more effectively with others. life's not so compartmentalized. So it's all happening at once. And this is why we often say, as soon as you start developing yourself, start developing the inner personality, raising the intellect's ability to function, what happens is everything comes up. Well, when I say that, your stress diminishes, your ability to relate improves. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So we can't say that we're going to relate perfectly if we're not developing ourselves. Similarly, if we're developing ourselves, the chances of us being able to relate to others drastically improves. Life and human being is this sort of integrated expression. And there's many, many factors. And this philosophy that we are exploring covers so many aspects of life. We've got a few classes, 5 classes, in fact, to just highlight and pinpoint some of the more predominant areas within our lives to just make it more clear to you guys what aspects we can engage in to immediately start trying to improve our current situation, not only with others, but obviously within ourselves. And the whole thing, I don't know if you remember that quote from the first lesson, was from that the crypt of the Archbishop. And essentially what it said at the end was that he tried to improve the entire world, and then only at the end of his days, he realized all he should have done was really work on himself. So that's the premise from which the entire philosophy springs. In fact, at the academy, in the course that Swamiji offers, and where I studied in India, you start with this poem. Yeah, Vedantic philosophy course, 3-year course, starts with an English poem called The Turkey and the Ant. And one of the crux of that poem is, ere ye remark another's sin, bid thine own conscience look within. The whole thing starts with turning your vision from out there, the whole world's up to no good, this one's to blame, that one's to blame, this situation's to blame, turn it in. How can I improve myself? As soon as you make that switch, and that's what Vedanta does, essentially just turns a mirror on you. So you can understand where your negativities lie. You can understand where you have the ability to improve. Turns that mirror inwards and takes a look at your inner personality and starts from there. Once that takes root and you start building that beautiful inner personality, you find that everything about and around you starts automatically improving. And when I say automatically, I mean, if you're putting in the energy and effort, you'll find that automatically your relationship improves, your stress becomes less, all these things purely attributed to being able to, as you said, deal with yourself. So the starting point is deal with yourself. Correct. So your point is valid. You okay, Rishabh?
Yes, Craig. Thank you so much for the explanation.
Great. Right.